Greetings, everyone. It is the Sabbath on April 29th, and I believe it's the 21st day of the Omer. If you're counting it, if you don't know what it is or don't know why you should count the Omer, then you should find out. We're in Daniel chapter 4 and verse 1. And again, I'm going to preface this. We went through the first 4 chapters of Daniel last time, and again, I have to say that there's a lot of things that we're probably not going to get out of Daniel. The first 4 chapters are easy and simple and wonderful and easy to understand once you know the circumstances. They're complicated in their way, but not very. And it's all easily understood, especially if you understand what's happening in the end time. Because of that, because of the understanding you get from Daniel 2, there are a lot of things later in Daniel that it makes sense not to understand in this time. Because once you understand what has to happen for God's kingdom to begin, once you understand that Babylon has to fall, and great is the fall thereof, then you have a much harder time seeing past that destruction, because the whole entire landscape of the future will have changed so dramatically that the things that are later in Daniel are going to be fairly difficult to understand. And they're written, in my opinion, again, I'll say it in my opinion, for circumstances that we can't understand. We can't read a lot of the end of Daniel very well because the political shift in the entire landscape is going to be so dramatic that we can't quite grasp all of the things. We can't see far enough into the future to be able to get a lot of these things. So I'm still going to read through it because it's an exploration for myself. I can read through it really simply on my own, but I want to read through it again with other people, and I don't care if I don't understand it in front of a whole bunch of people that are watching me read it. I don't care. So I'm going to read it and we'll see what comes out, because sometimes God will give you things that he has never given you before. And, this is a Bible study kind of atmosphere around me typically, and we'll continue with that. Okay, Daniel 4:1, and this verse is the last verse of the last chapter in the Jewish Bible, I think, that the ladies here are using. And honestly, I think it belongs in chapter 4 myself, but there are no chapter headings in God, in what God wrote. So, Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all the people, nations and tongues, nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God has wrought towards me. How great are his signs. Sorry, I gotta focus on what I'm reading here. And how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. And if you take that and that understanding that Daniel has of God's kingdom, think about who you're talking to, you're listening to or from with Daniel. Daniel is explaining right there the kingdom of God as though he were in the New Testament. Do you get that? There are very, very few places in the entire Old Testament where anyone talks about God's kingdom itself. Daniel has a unique knowledge, almost unique knowledge. There were others. Micah and Isaiah also had a clue, as did obviously Abraham. But nobody stated it in this same way as Daniel did in the Old Testament. So know that this is a very unusual scripture that talks almost, you could put this in the New Testament and nobody would think twice. You could probably fool almost anybody by taking this scripture out of there and just planting it somewhere in Matthew and giving it the wrong, verse and chapter, and they'd almost undoubtedly read over it and say, oh, yeah. Not even knowing that it was written so much earlier with a different context that everybody typically thinks of. So I'll read it again. Daniel 4, verse 3. How great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. And verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. And I saw a dream which made me afraid, and my thoughts and the thoughts upon my bed, the visions of my head troubled me. Even Nebuchadnezzar, when God interacts with people, it's frequently on their bed. Daniel, you go through the Psalms and you look at that, it's when people are thinking on their own in a relaxed state that God can frequently get to them. So, and that's the case here with Nebuchadnezzar as well. The visions in my head troubled me. Therefore I made a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers, and I told them the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at last Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and you can see his total lack of understanding, and no secret troubles you, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. Thus were the visions of my head in my bed. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and it was food for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit, let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls of the branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots even in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass and the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, which, if you go back and look at that word, you see that bounce off of a lot of different scriptures in various places, and particularly in some other books that are not the Bible. But there's no question in my mind that this is talking about the angels, is what it is. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomsoever he will, and sets up over it the basest of men. So, translation there, when God does something on earth, the kings he chooses are typically the basest of men. Why is that? You might ask, why is that? Why would God set up the basest of men over the earth as kings? There's so many answers to that question. We deserve it. Flat out, we deserve it. And the worse the king is, the more we deserve it. So, yeah, that's the primary reason. There are lots of other reasons. Because God needs to do what he needs to do, he puts men there who are capable of doing those things. And some of those things are truly horrible. So when God puts a king in there that is willing to kill a bunch of people, he wanted to kill a bunch of people for whatever reason. When he puts someone in there who punishes a bunch of people, in whatever way he does that, God wanted that to occur. God knows who these kings are. They may be vessels of destruction. They're probably vessels of destruction. God just wants to do what he wants to do. And we don't have anything to say about that. And if you think by voting someone else in, then who God wants is going to help you, you're highly confused. And it will turn out worse than you think it will. But know that kings typically are base, the basest of men. They're willing to compromise to do anything. And in God's kingdom, it's not going to be like that. So know that this is the case. Verse 18, this dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. And I would say the holy God, but don't want to put words in Nebuchadnezzar's mouth. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished. It's not really astonished. He was mystified. He was, sort of stunned, but more like he was thinking about it furiously, unable to come to an understanding. So, your mind going a billion miles an hour and unable to process everything that has come to you. Sometimes it's by shock, because of the horror of something like Jeremiah has seen, or whatever it is, but you're just unable to process everything in a concise fashion. So where was I? He was stonied. Where is it? I went too far. No. Oh, there he is. Stonied for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble you. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, the dream be to them that hate you, and the interpretation thereof to your enemies. So perhaps Daniel got it instantaneously. In any case, he was troubled. My suspicion is he got it almost instantaneously. But he was troubled by the content of what he got. And how do you tell a king, the most powerful king who can say one word and you're dead, how can you tell him that he's going to dwell like an animal and his kingdom is going to be taken away from him? You might think about that for an hour before you do it. Anyway, verse 20, the tree that you saw, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and it was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwell, and upon whose branches the fowls of heaven had their habitation. It is you, O king, that are grown and become strong. For your greatness is grown, and reaches unto heaven, and your dominion to the end of the earth. And whereas the king saw a watcher and an holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with the band of iron and brass and the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 years pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 years shall pass over you, 7 times, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomsoever he will. And that is no different today than it was then. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of your tree roots, your kingdom shall be sure unto you. After that, you shall have known that the heavens do rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you, and break off your sins by righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of your tranquility. Daniel is a master of words. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. And the king spoke and said, Is it not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and the honor of my majesty? And while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from you. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomsoever he will. And this is one of those very, very, very few places in the Bible where God or an angel directly, speaking the words of God in any case, speaks directly to someone who is not one of his people. Very, very rare circumstance, that. The writing on the wall, this one, I can't think of anything else at the moment. There are some other examples. Balaam's ass, few other circumstances in the Bible, not a common thing at all. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as an ox, as a cow, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. So, why this exercise? What did God do this for? It's an exercise for us, but it tells us some things. It tells us some things about the difference between then and now. In that time, Nebuchadnezzar repented. Before God, he repented. And he acknowledged God. And in this time, what's going to happen? Mm-mm. Nobody's going to repent, and nobody's going to recognize God from the rulership of this earth. And I say that from the standpoint of Babylon, not necessarily from some of the other nations, because there will be people who will turn themselves around later. But this shows us some important things about who God is and what he's willing to do to the kings of this earth. He's more than happy to humble people if they need it. Why did he restore Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom? To finish the story, but more importantly, because Nebuchadnezzar was that head of gold, and God was not going to deprive him of his kingdom. It needed to flow seamlessly into the next one. Did his predecessor, or his, I'm saying it wrong, his, not predecessor, but postcessor, who was the king that the writing on the wall? What was his name? Remember?
Belteshazzar.
No. Might be
Belteshazzar.
first.
It's
We'll read it. We'll read it here.
Belshazzar.
No. We'll continue on.
Something like
We'll read it here in a little while. Let's let it go. But the point is that
it
is okay. Well, we'll continue on. In any case, this whole circumstance, God's illustrating what he can do with kingdoms, what he can do with men, what he can do with things that are beyond men's power. The things he can do with men, he's not limited by much. He can take away a kingdom. You know how hard it is to rise to the top of a kingdom like that? To become the president of the United States or something like that? It is extraordinarily difficult to do such a thing. And then to lose it and get it back after you've behaved like an animal in the field for 7 years? And yet God brought him back. Gave him back something that other people were undoubtedly very much willing to keep. Imagine who was ruling for 7 years after Nebuchadnezzar was gone. He was walking around like a sheep. So I have my doubts that anybody but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or if my brain will kick in and I'll remember their real names, and Daniel, they were probably holding his place for him. Everybody knew he was coming back because of the prophecy, but my suspicion is Daniel and company held his place for him. Let me read that verse 34 again. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? This was the king of the whole earth. So we're learning something here about God. And we're learning it from whom? Somebody who is like the president of the United States, only far, far superior. Imagine if the president of the United States came out today and read Daniel 4:34 and Daniel 4:35, spoke those words originally from himself. What would happen? He'd be in the loony ward in a matter of seconds. Oh, he's lost his reason. They'd have him tied up like a pig in the market. So know that this is a description of who God is as much as anything. And also, this book is also unique because, as I recall, as I recall, this is the only chapter of the Bible that was written by somebody who was not one of God's people. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the only chapter of the Bible that was written by someone else. Pretty sure. But I only went to a seminary for 1 year and couldn't take that. So I don't remember anything more than that. Okay, Daniel verse 36, 4:36. At the same time, my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of the kingdom, for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and brightness returned unto me, and my counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. Anybody who walks in pride, God can abase. He can squash you down to where you are nothing in anyone's sight. Did anyone seek after Nebuchadnezzar while he was in his state as an animal? The answer is probably. They probably did for a little while. They're like, oh, well, let's go see Nebuchadnezzar. It was probably a little scary. They probably were afraid to abuse him because they knew he was coming back. But imagine if you were in that state today in this country. What would happen to you walking down the street? Not just a homeless person, but somebody out there eating grass. I shudder. I shudder to think how you would be treated in this day and age. So, is there a lot to be learned from that chapter? Yes. But it's nothing, as far as I can see, that is prophetically hugely profound. Let's continue on in Daniel 5, verse 1. Belshazzar, the king, made a great... He has another name. You remember what his other name is? Anyway.
Belshazzar, that I don't know.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. And Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Belshazzar was not used to Hollywood, and Belshazzar was not used to everything that we do with computers now. Belshazzar saw this hand appear on the wall near him, writing on the wall, and that was enough to scare him. He knew what he'd seen. He wasn't confused. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers, and the king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was the king Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonied. They were confused and upset, and one of these days I'm going to remember the right word, the perfect word for that astonied, but it's not coming to me yet. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spoke and said, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of your father light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, I say your father, She's making a point of it over and over, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding and interpreting of dreams and of showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, now let Daniel be called, and he will show you the interpretation. I think it's interesting that Belteshazzar and Belshazzar are really close.
Me too.
Because guess what?
Both like fun.
Nebuchadnezzar named them both. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spoke and said unto Daniel, Are you that Daniel, which are the children of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in you. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of you that you can make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if you can read the writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, you shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. High drama. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts remain with you. Give yourself those gifts, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known unto him the interpretation. Again, he knew exactly what it said instantaneously. O you, king, the most high God, gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and tongues trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would set up, and whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints over it whomsoever he will. Let's stop for a second and say, why did it take 7 years? 7 years as an animal. Anybody, you guys have a guess why that is? Because pride is that strong. It's that hard to break down. He had to live as a beast for 7 years, not 7 days, not 7 months, 7 years to break that pride down. It took that long before he would recognize who God was. God didn't randomly choose that time. He put him there as long as it would take. I hope that 7 minutes would be enough for me. I mean, really.
Grass and see how long to
Whom he would he put down. Verse 20 again. But then when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the donkeys. They fed him with grass like an oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men. Until he knew. 7 years it took. And that he appoints over it whomsoever he will. So we're making this point again. We've already made it like 4 times, and now we're making it again. God will appoint over the earth whomsoever he will. Nobody's going to change this. I don't care how many people you get in your little voting coalition or whatever. So who's going to rule the earth in the end time? Who's going to rule the earth in the end time? A variety of different people, actually. But the beast is the one that's going to rule over the whole earth next. And what does God call him? The Assyrian. Which is real close to where Nebuchadnezzar was. But the Assyrians were a little meaner. And you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. You knew this. You grew up with this. But you didn't listen. You didn't hear what your father had to say. You rebelled. But have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you and your lords and your wives and your concubines have drunk wine in them, and you have praised the gods of silver and of gold and of brass and iron and wood and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand your breath is, and whose are all your ways, have you not glorified? Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, or something like that. I always thought it was Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, because Mene sounds mean, but there you have it. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. He says that twice. Tekel, you are weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Perez, or Upharsin, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Why did they do that? Because when the king said something back then, it had weight. When the king said something back then, you didn't back out of it. You didn't do the Twitter shuffle. Back then, there was no Twitter shuffle. There was just what the king said, and the king's word meant something, even though this guy was not someone who was one of God's people or someone who would even pay attention to God. Everybody on the earth was not like we are now. There were few people on the earth that are like what we're like now, willing to go back on our word instantaneously for any reason. We have lost our ability to honor our own word in this nation and in this world. Everybody cheats backwards, forwards, anytime they feel like it. And that was not something that occurred back then. When you were a king, even in Babylon, your word meant something. And they assumed, rightly, that the king's word would stand. These guys just came in and did exactly what the king said would happen as soon as Daniel did what the king asked him to do. And guess what? Daniel was the third ruler of the kingdom. May have been for a very short amount of time, but that was how it was. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. Same night. And Darius the Mede took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Pretty old, 62. But let's go back and hit the main point of all of this. Again, for the manyth time. There it is, verse 21. The Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints over it whomsoever he wills. So, in the context of everything that happens in Daniel, including the setting up of God's kingdom, God's own kingdom, this is true. This is the backdrop for the entire political situation in the entire world from the beginning to the end. And you best get that in your head really, really strongly, because whose servant is the beast? The beast is God's servant, and he is going to rule the earth for 42 months, give or take a little, in power. And whose choice is that? God's. Who's going to stop it? Nobody. Nuh-uh. Not nobody. It's going to continue that way until God is ready to end it. Why does America rule the whole earth now? Because God set it up that way. We don't actually rule the whole earth, but we do control the whole earth. America controls the whole earth one way or another. Can't always get their way with everything. The beast is going to get his way with everything. And he's going to cut off nations, not a few. So know that the reason that these two chapters are in here are to emphasize that God is in control of this. And if you fight against the beast, what's going to happen? You're going to get destroyed unless you are one of the two witnesses and speak for God on the earth. If you fight against him when you're in captivity in one of these nations as a slave, you will end. You will be ended. They will end you. So there are a lot of people that are going to go into captivity, that are going to become slaves in the nations of the earth. They're going to get scattered all over the whole planet. And if you fight against the beast, you will be destroyed. You are going to have to bow and kneel to a king other than God in that way because you are forced. Because why? Because God is going to humble you. He's going to humble you. It's not 7 years, but it's 3.5. And you won't be eating grass. But they will treat you badly. The only way you avoid this is to stand up like a pillar before Babylon is destroyed. The only way to avoid this is to stand up and become part of Ezekiel's hem. And most people cannot do that. That is not most people's forte. They can't do that. But there are over 144,000 people who will do that. Well over 144,000. So when the time comes, don't deny Christ. Not only don't deny him, but stand up and do what you're supposed to in this time. Because God will humble you if you don't humble yourself. Does that say that directly here? No. But that's the allegory that I'm drawing from this, because that's the best allegory to draw from this.
I'm confused.
What are you confused about?
Okay, just to clarify, and I'm not saying you're wrong, however, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we're not going to bow down and worship you or your statue. Throw us in the fiery furnace. Now there people that are left are supposed to bow and kneel to another. I just clarifying.
No, so I'm not saying voluntarily. They are going to be made to do whatever it is that they are going to do.
Yeah,
they can.
Well, I would if you didn't do it, they'd shoot you or kill you or whatever. But okay,
but it's not. So,
doesn't it actually say because you were willing to do all these things before? There are some scriptures that say because you bowed down and you did all these things before, I'm going to make you go and bow down and worship. You want to worship other gods? I'll let you worship other gods. You're going to go down and you're going to bow down to whatever I put in front of you.
Well, yes, but realize what the context is here. This isn't a circumstance where, life is proceeding on normally and we have a choice of whether we are, bow down to an idol or not. This isn't that circumstance. This is the circumstance of you admitted to God that you had sin. You admitted your sins before God. So what does that do for you? In the destruction of Babylon, that keeps you from dying, is what that does. That's all that does. So when everybody else in America is dead, you will still be alive. However, the circumstance is not an everyday kind of circumstance. You will be alive, but you will be dragged off as a slave. And you will be raped and pillaged in whatever way they feel like. And you will be tortured and made to do whatever it is that they make you to do. So we can read some of those scriptures. There's not a point ever in any one of these people's moments that they should actually obey some other God or believe in some other God. Because if they do that, they will die. Period. And if they remain in the countries that God sends them to after this is all over with, then God will kill them there. The only way you get through this is by holding on to God by the skin of your chinny chin chin and your fingernails, through being raped and pillaged and made to do the worst possible circumstances that people can go through. You think it's going to be nice to have 50 Chinese people using you as their slave? Yeah, no. But you will be alive, and if you hold on to God and endure, you will get into God's kingdom. In this time, the kingdom will not be left to other people. You will get there if you pay attention to who your king is. Does that mean they won't break your knees and make you bow? They might. There's no telling what they're going to do, and God's going to let them do it. You have to survive through it. That's your role in this circumstance if you will only admit your sin. God will break your pride. God will break your pride if you admit your sin. If you can't break your pride yourself, then God has to break it for you. If you break your pride yourself, if you abase yourself, if you humble yourself, and you actually stand up as a pillar in America before the fall, showing your faith, showing your strength, that you are a pillar and worthy to be in the inner court of the kingdom of God, of the temple of God, then yeah, you won't go through that. You'll go through some other stuff, but not as bad as that. Most people are not in the inner court of the temple of God. They're just not. This isn't the easiest thing in the world. But God's showing you very, very clearly in these 2 chapters of Daniel that he's willing to abase anyone with pride. We're not going to walk around in God's kingdom puffed up like banty roosters. It's not going to be how it is. God doesn't allow that kind of thing in his kingdom. It's not coming in. So your choice is humility or death. Choose. How many times has God told us to choose? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Lots of people are going to do that. What was right here? I mean, what was Belshazzar's choice? He chose over time, like us. He chose in his life not to do all the things that Nebuchadnezzar undoubtedly taught him. Nebuchadnezzar undoubtedly taught him who God actually was. Through that whole experience, and through the things that he wrote in his own chapter of the Bible, he taught his son. He should have known, he should have remembered who Daniel was on his own. Should have remembered that. But he chose something else, and what did God do? Killed him, dead. Same night. He gave him a message, and then he killed him. And that's kind of the same thing that's going on in Babylon. The message is here, you're hearing it. And Babylon's not far from dying. Chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. So Darius is now king, and he can do whatever he wants, so he changes things. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. So notice we have a change from gold to silver. And what happened to Babylon? Practically nothing. This is a leadership change. That's it. We got a ruler come in, and there was a little change of rulership, and the Medes are now in charge, but Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Azariah, I can never remember their names unless I read them. Azariah is one of them. Mishael and Hananiah. So, sorry. I had to blow the trumpet. Yeah, they're all there. So, we look back in verse 2 there again, and, Daniel was one of them, but Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were there somewhere. And there was no change from what, there's no dramatic rift in the political scenery except for at the very top. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. A king from another entirely different nation comes in and leaves the third ruler of the kingdom and then puts him over the entire kingdom. That's without precedent in modern times. Then, yeah, but now everybody changes everything out. New president, new cabinet. Who keeps the same old cabinet? Nobody. Then the presidents and princes, advisors, I don't know why it says presidents, it's a poor translation. And princes, you might even call them, there's a lot of things you could call them, sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Daniel was something else, must have had a phenomenal memory, didn't get anything wrong, no errors, no faults. Oh, that we could be like Daniel. Then said these wise, in more ways than one, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So these advisors and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. How do you butter somebody up? You compliment him and say, hey, live forever, buddy. There's just this one little thing. All the advisors of the kingdom, the governors and the princes and the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of you, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which alters not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing of the decree. It's always amazing to me how they never even think about this kind of thing for a second. I'm the king, I can sign what I want, and this sounds good in my sight. Boom. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. 3 times upon his knees toward Jerusalem. I wonder who copied that. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spoke before the king concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree? Didn't we just make a law about this? That every man that shall ask any petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which alters not. Once it's said, it can't be unsaid. Then they said before the king, oh, well, Daniel, which was one of the children of the captivity of Judah, he ignored you. He said you were nothing. He didn't regard you, O king, nor the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself. Oh, what have I done? And set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Tried to change his mind, tried to change his word, couldn't do it. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establishes may be changed. It may be a bad decision, but boy howdy, we're sticking to it. And it's good not to break your word. However, laws that exist forever when you are not God, bad idea. Which tells you something about God's law. It's really good. It will work forever, literally forever, without being changed. Unlike the law of the Medes and the Persians. Verse 16, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said unto Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. And I'm sure he said that with a certain amount of trepidation. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. So, why would he say that? Why would he say, your God will save you? Could it be that he heard some of the things that had happened in the past with Nebuchadnezzar? Could it be that everyone in the entire known world knew that Nebuchadnezzar dwelled as a donkey in the field? Yeah, everybody knew. And everybody in the whole world knew who Daniel was. He was not only the ruler, basically, of the Babylonian Empire by default, but everybody knew this story through the whole world. Everybody knew about it. This was a legend that this king right here, he was alive during it. He was 62 years old when he arrived. He was alive during this whole drama. He heard every bit of it. He knew. And he was a wise king. silver, not gold, but a wise king. And where were we? Concerning the night might not be changed. Concerning Daniel, verse 18, then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Had a sleepless night. In the same circumstances, what would have happened with Daniel? Probably would have slept like a baby. Probably would have. He knew that God would solve this problem. I'm not saying he slept like a baby with the lions, but maybe he did. You know, he might have been napping right there with them, staying warm on top of 2 or 3 lions. But in the same circumstance as the king was, Daniel would have been probably snoring peacefully. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice, which tells you that he was terrified still. Daniel would be dead. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom you serve continually, able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before you, O king, have I done no hurt. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them and their children and their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them, and broke all their bones in pieces, or ever they came to the bottom of the den. So they were hungry and probably really irritated because they couldn't eat Daniel. And once God said, hey, the glue's out of your mouths, then they managed to chew them and break their bones before they even came to rest at the bottom of the den. That's some hungry lions. Not something I would ever want to experience. Then King Darius wrote unto all the nations, people, nations, and tongues that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. So, what can we take away from this in the end time? The test of faith. That's the biggest thing, by far, the test of faith. So Daniel passed the test of faith, and the test of faith was, oh, nobody can hurt me. Don't care if they throw me in the den of lions. What's our test of faith? Our test of faith is to stand up and speak the words of God in the time that we're supposed to speak them, and not be afraid of what anybody else thinks. That's our test of faith. Are we worried about being thrown into the lion's den? Yeah, we kind of are. Are we worried about what people will say about us? Yeah, we kind of are. Are we going to have to get over that? Yeah, we kind of are. We're going to have to be those people that God wanted us to be, Christ wanted us to be, when he was here on the planet. He taught us how we were supposed to act, and now we have to act that way in this moment. Virtually everything he said when he was here was about this moment. It was also for the intervening years, but let's face it, it was a desert of God's Spirit from the time he left, or the time the apostles died, until the very end time. A desert. And it's going to have to become a paradise in this time, with God's Spirit showing and people standing up and doing what they're supposed to do. Or what? If we don't, God will raise up rocks and replace us. Obey or die. Have faith or die. What's going to happen to us in this time? We're going to get thrown into the lion's den. Why? Because this is the latter harvest. This is the great harvest. This is the biggest time of the entire planet. This is the time that God's been working up to from the time of Adam. Everything is about this end time, where the big harvest is, where there are lots of people who know about God and who care about God. But guess what? If we don't do what we're supposed to, means nothing. And God has to raise up stones. If we won't humble ourselves, if we won't admit our sin, if we won't humble ourselves before God, then God will kill us and start again. And we've been in that circumstance before with the flood and with this and with that and the other thing. God is not going to fail at what he's doing. But we can. We have to choose to do what he wants us to do in faith. Just as Daniel did. Just as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah did. And we're not going to run into any kings. Low percentage chance we're going to run into any kings that agree with us. Not too many Dariuses or Nebuchadnezzars in the end time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but of the ones that we have record of in the Bible, none of them behave that way. Mostly clay here at the end. At best, iron. And iron just breaks in pieces. Verse 26. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. It's an interesting decree. It's not possible for a man to command such things of other men, except in rare circumstances where a threat is over someone's head, an immediate threat is over someone's head, but then they're not afraid of the thing that they're told to be afraid of. They're afraid of him that is holding something over their head. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. And his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Yeah, that's what we're talking about all the way through here, is God's kingdom and his dominion. And here we have two pagan kings, the head of gold and the head of silver, saying, yeah, it is God's kingdom, and his dominion shall be unto the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in the earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So know that in this end time, that things are going to get rough. And we are going to be tried. Our faith is going to be tried. And things are not going to go well for us sometimes. And it's going to be ugly. And there is nothing we can do about that. Except walk in faith. Speak truly. Speak justly. Don't break your word. Speak the words of God. His words cannot be broken. What else are you going to do? Again, it's that or eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. There's no choice about this. It'd be nice if there was a way out, but there's no way out. The choice in the end time is final. It's live or die, and there's no halfway measures. There's no escape from the choice. It's going to come before us whether we like it or not. And that's ugly. That's hard to face. That's not pretty. There's nothing about it that's pretty. Why do you think the whole world is terrified right now? The whole world is terrified right now. All the financial people, everybody in the whole world is a little terrified right now because they can't see a way out. And in fact, they're right. There is no way out. The way of the world is to solve these problems with war. That's the only way these problems have ever been worked out, whether it was World War I, World War II, whatever circumstance, when you get to an impasse and nobody's willing to compromise to fix something, then it's wartime. And we're just almost there. And nobody can stop it at this point. The only thing we can do is stand up and do what God told us to do. We can't balk. We can't turn our back. Daniel chapter 7. Verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. And the first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto it. And behold, another beast, second like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, and devour much flesh. And after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I'm not going to go into any kind of a big explanation of this. I've heard everybody else's explanations of it, and I'm not entirely sure they're not correct. They're missing out on a lot of subtleties that I know are there, but I don't know the answers to. Verse 9 gives us something we can dig our teeth into a little bit. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So, I beheld till the thrones were cast down. What does that mean? That means the destruction of all other nations on the planet. And I'm not saying all the other nations of the planet, but the nations have lost their kingdoms. And, that doesn't mean they don't exist necessarily, but it definitely means that God's kingdom has been established in the top of the mountains, at the very least. So that establishes a time period in Daniel 7:9, the destruction of the kings of the earth, essentially. Verse 10, a fire stream issued and came forth from before him, and thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the judgment was set, and the books were opened. So this gives us perfect timing. We know when this is. Gotta go over to Revelation 21, I think.
5:11.
25:11 or 21:5?
And 2012. No, 5:11 and Revelation.
No. This is the judgment book. No. Let me look. $2012.
Yeah, I said 2012 and 5:11.
Okay. There you go. Let me go back to where I was. And the books were open, and I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke, I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. So, well, let's read 12 too. And as concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Some things wrong with what everybody else has said. Maybe. So in verse 11, I beheld then, because the voice of the great words which the horn spoke, and I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. This tells me a lot of things, and I can't say with certainty any of them necessarily, but we know that this is the beast, and in all likelihood, this is the first beast. And if I had to guess, and again, this is all my opinion, I'm not stating any of this dogmatically. If I had to guess, my opinion is that this circumstance is probably describing what happens to the first beast, that he actually is, ascends out of the bottomless pit. So given to that burning flame sounds like a ceremonial thing to me. His body destroyed and given to the burning flame. My suspicion is that he comes back. We know that he does based upon what Revelation says. The only person that ascends out of the bottomless pit is the beast. And this seems to describe a similar circumstance, or at least the offering of his body initially. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Yeah, that was a tough one. Are all those beasts alive concurrently? We run into a problem here with metaphors and, what is metaphoric and what isn't. We run into what is a season and a time. When you talk about their lives being prolonged, context is the judgment in verse 9 and 10, and then suddenly their long lives are prolonged for a season at a time. It doesn't jive. So I don't know. And I said that at the beginning. And I'm going to continue to say that. I don't know the specifics of some of this, and it's beyond our ability to comprehend, I think, at this point. Are these scriptures about these beasts, are they multiple, prophetic, are there multiple iterations of these prophecies? Very possibly. It doesn't seem like it in the context of what we're dealing with, but they very well could be. So let's read on. And I have very little that I will say about this dogmatically, because it is what it is. Verse 13, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given to him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. his dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So this is the most obvious, glaringly obvious scripture in the Old Testament that talks about Jesus Christ and the Father of us all. So we have the Son of Man, verse 13, came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, the Father, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. This is without question or doubt Christ, the Christ, and we have him being brought before the Ancient of Days. And I haven't looked up these words recently. We could look at them right quick and figure out which ones they are, but you can do that in your own time. The reality is that this is very clearly the Messiah standing before the Father and the moment probably of his coronation forever. And we'll leave that there. And now we're going to see an interpretation of the vision. So we'll get more stuff. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. And I came near unto one of them that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me to know the interpretation of the things. So this is interesting. I came near to one of them that stood by. Daniel was in pretty good company. There were lots of them, apparently, that were standing by. And these great beasts, 17, these great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So against these kings, we will absolutely prevail. Verse 19, then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I beheld the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. Prevailed against them. That's really important that you understand that somebody is going to prevail against us. Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Interesting. Because this is all in a much shorter context, in my book, than what most people would put this in. When we talk about judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. When is that? Yeah, early on. We're still in the days of the first beast. Well, just after the days of the first beast. So, pretty important. After Babylon's destroyed, we inherit the kingdom approximately 42 months later. So, verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. This is the first beast, in my opinion. First beast and the ruler of the whole earth without any question whatsoever. Not just part of the earth, like all the kingdoms of Babylon, but the entire earth. Every square meter. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and seasons and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and a times and the dividing of a time. So 3.5 years. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. The judgment shall sit. Oh, to know precisely exactly what that means. There are a lot of different ways that sentence could be interpreted. I can look at it later in the Hebrew, but I don't think it would help much. The first beast loses his stuff, and this little guy that raises up the 3 horns or destroys takes hold of the 3 kings. Yeah, I don't know. I can't see it far enough. My suspicion is that this is farther out. It's hard to say. Really, honestly, this is not an easy thing to nail down. So when you wear out the saints of the Most High, this could be the circumstances of being trodden underfoot for 42 months, but I don't think so. It might be. And the reason I don't think so is primarily because of the change in the beasts and change in the beast. So you have this 4th beast, and then the 10 horns, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. I think this is after, but I can't say that with certainty. My thought is that this is either the second beast or possibly even one of the interim other ones. So it's hard to say. He's probably the second beast, what we call the second beast. 7th or the 8th or whatever. Verse 27, and the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. So this is without any question after, as we have all dominions shall serve and obey him. I have too many questions about this. This could be after we are raised up to be spirit being, but before the millennium is over, or it could be after the millennium and after the judgment. It's hard to say. Honestly, I don't think we can pin it down yet. I think it's going to have to be pinned down by God, and that's all I can say about it. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. He knew these things would occur, and he saw these things in, technicolor. When God was showing him these visions, he understood far more than he could write down in words. Did he understand the context of what he was saying? No, he couldn't possibly have. But it bothered him a lot because he could see things that were very great things that he knew would occur, but they weren't in his time, and he could do nothing about them. And he had no choice but to just hold it in his heart. And when you hold things like that in your heart, it changes you. And Daniel was undoubtedly changed by this. So, it is what it is. Chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. So we're back in time now, back with Belshazzar. A vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw it, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And we talked about Elam before on the basically part of Iran. And I saw in a vision, I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before me, before the river, a ram which had 2 horns, and 2 horns were high. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. And I saw the ram push westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, and the he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and broke his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. The little horn, and out of one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking to another saint, and said unto that certain saint which spoke, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. There's a lot of things that I understand pieces about this. But I'm not really willing to say much about it. Yeah. Let's read the interpretation, and we'll go from there. And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So we know who Gabriel is. Michael Gabriel. What was his name? What does his name mean, Mom? I can't remember. Is this the Savior of Israel, or what's Gabriel's name mean?
I can't remember.
Okay. All right. Well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna look it up right now. He's one of the three highest angels there are. So only the Messiah could have been talking to him, or the Father. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So, at the end, when is that? Now, or soon, really soon. And I'll go back and mention really quick, Son of Man is a title for God's man on the earth in a given time. It's also a title of the Messiah, but it's a specific title of God's man on the earth in a given time. Daniel was called the Son of Man. Jeremiah was called the Son of Man. Isaiah was called the Son of Man. Ezekiel, number of people called by this title. And frequently it's used interchangeably. Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright and said, Behold, I will make you to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. The ram's identity. The ram which you saw, having two horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. In the latter time of their kingdom, while the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true, wherefore shut you up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. And he told them. Otherwise, why would he say nobody understood it? So, most people describe this as what happened in Greece with the four kings, and I don't doubt that. Well, I'm sorry?
And then Rome.
Yes.
They say it's about Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece.
And I don't doubt that is also true, but there is something else in here. And
so it's an end time prophecy.
Yes. And when the transgressors are come to the full, yeah, shall prosper in practice and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. My thought is that this is after and just before the abomination that makes desolate. God's kingdom is alive and well on the earth, and yet there are still many things that have to happen, including the bride fleeing to the place of safety, and Jerusalem being destroyed, the two witnesses being killed, Jerusalem being partly destroyed, the two witnesses being killed, and my suspicion is this is that time. But it's really, really hard to see because really hard to see. So you see Daniel 8:25 here, and through his policy he shall also cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart. You know, this sounds a bit like Habakkuk, and it sounds a bit like certain other scriptures where you can see where someone, you know, offends God and crosses over and does different things. And he stands up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And when you talk about the prince of princes, you're talking about the Messiah. There's nobody else that fits that category. So, you know, you may be a prince of the Messiah, but this is not talking about one of the two witnesses, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's talking about the Messiah himself in that final pretty bad iteration. You know, you gotta picture all of this in the backdrop of, you know, Jerusalem, the temple being there, of God being right there in the cloud of, you know, the cloud and the pillar of fire, And when you see that, then it makes sense that somebody shall stand up against against God, because he allows the two witnesses to be killed and the abomination of desolation, placed. So, or to occur, however you want to say it. That's the only thing I have to say about it. All done.
Okay. We will start on Daniel.
Yeah. Daniel 9 is where we're at. For next time. Everybody have a good day, and sorry if this doesn't have enough information for you, but this is not, I warned you at the beginning, this is not some easy stuff. It's, when you talk about the end time, this far into the end time, really hard to see past the destruction of Babylon, the beast, and the establishment of God's kingdom. When you see stuff beyond that, it's flashes at best. Anyway, bye.